Hello and welcome back, adventurers. This is Captain TTRPG, and today we're talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. White-hot sparks spill from a cold steel table, the reflection of gears and springs perfectly merging with a heavy, blunt object fills each lens of the goggles worn alongside a wicked smile. A loud banging and orders barked through a wooden door can faintly be heard in the background, fading to white noise as the inventor completes his grand innovation. Carefully but purposefully, the magnificent crafter adjusts the molten core of his device, taking it up for the first time to bask in its glory. Iron hinges, no longer capable of containing the force, give way as the room quickly fills with guards from a nearby keep. The captain, barking meaningless orders, is ignored by the mechanical genius, lost in his creation. As the first hand is laid upon the inventor's shoulder, his mind meets reality. He whips around with haste. His maul, covered in gadgets and accessories, is brought with great force upon the nearest guard. Blades, nets, and nearly any structure that one could implement upon the base has been welded to it. Despite the peculiar yet impressive weapon, the brilliant crafter, outnumbered and overwhelmed, leans into his backup plan. As the patrol closes in, and with a wide smile on the man's face, he presses a single red button, which simply reads, Plan B. A grave, loud, fiery explosion can be heard from well outside the room, while inside, badly wounded soldiers grab at Burns as the genius leaps from the only window in the room, powered by his explosive weapon of great destruction. Welcome back, adventurers. Today we are talking about the Inventor class. Inventors are top-of-the-line crafters. They are highly intelligent, martial characters that bring innovations to the table. Despite them being martial characters, they don't use either dex or strength as their primary ability score. In fact, they use intelligence. But they do still get 8 hit points per level, so that's not terrible. It's like other lower-end martials, and it's stronger than some straight casters. But even though these are intelligence-based characters, they get no spellcasting at all. Each subclass gets a different innovation, and that really is your subclass, and these completely change how you want to play. You're going to be martial either way, but what you tend to lean into will really revolve around that innovation that you're building up. So, what are the basics? Well, again, you are an intelligence-based character, which means you're going to have a ton of skill proficiencies because you get skill proficiencies with higher intelligence values, and you are great at recalling information, making crafting checks, and possibly leaning into some of the other intelligence-based skills like alchemy. But we'll get back to crafting. So, inventors have access to light armor and medium armor, as well as martial weapons, which is a solid base for any martial character. You are going to be able to take advantage of either dexterity or strength. When we see characters that only get light armor, you really have to lean into dex to increase your AC, but having medium means you can really lean strength if you want to. You're going to want one of those two to be your secondary ability score, just so that you have a good chance to hit with your weapon attacks. The Inventor has several features at level 1 that really help it stand out from other classes. And we're not talking about the subclass here, which is, honestly, compared to a lot of these other features, almost a small note at level 1. First, we have to understand, though, some keywords for the class. And we're going to start off with unstable. So this is a trait that actions can have, and any action with this means that after you use said action or activity, you have to attempt a DC 15 flat check, or 13 if you are legendary in crafting, thank you Remaster, which of course you get at level 15. So until then you're going to have to pass a flat check. If you fail that flat check, your innovation will let off like a puff of smoke, or some sparks will fly or something, and you can't use any more unstable actions for 10 minutes, which you need to reset it. So you have to go between combats to reset your innovation to be able to use unstable actions. However, you can continue to use any action without unstable traits, just like you could before. On a critical fail, you also take fire damage equal to your level, unless you have the construct innovation. We'll get to that, and then it'll take it instead of you. Some actions have an unstable trait but they are only unstable if you choose to use the unstable version of the action, but there's a base version. So you don't have to roll unless you use the unstable version, but if you do use that, you then have to roll. On screen, you can see an example here. It's called Megavolt. This uses D4s for the damage dice normally, but if you want to make it unstable, then it becomes D12. So even if you used it and the unstable trait went off because you failed, and suddenly you can't use unstable traits, you could still use the base D4's version of this without having unstable available to you any longer. The next thing to understand are modifications. These are permanent adjustments made to your innovation, your subclass. An example of a modification for a weapon innovation would be the entangling form that adds the trip and grapple traits to your weapon. There are 3 levels of modifications. There are initial, breakthrough, and revolutionary. These become available at level 1, 7, and 15 respectively. Every time you get to one of those levels, you will be allowed to add a modification for free, and there are other ways to add them through feats. All right, 2 down and more to go. Let's talk about Overdrive. This is a single action that you make a crafting check against a standard DC for your level. So this isn't a flat check, but this means because it's a standard DC and your crafting is always going to be very high, you've probably got at least 50% chance to succeed, with maybe even a 10% chance to critically succeed, and you should probably only critically fail on a 1, generally speaking. If you critically succeed, for the next minute, your strikes will deal an extra 4 damage at level 1. I say that because really what you're doing is you're adding your intelligence modifier, which should be a +4 at level 1, but it's always your intelligence modifier. On a success, rather than a crit success, you're going to add half your intelligence modifier, or a +2 at level 1. On a failure, you're still going to add 1 fire damage to your strikes. So even though you failed your check, you're still getting something out of doing this. On a critical fail, which should only happen if you roll a 1, you take damage equal to your level and can't try doing this action again for 1d4 rounds. After you succeed at Overdrive, it will need a minute to cool down before you can do it again. This is the Inventor version, like a weaker Rage almost. So it's not as powerful as something like that, but it is a consistent way to add damage. And really, even 2 damage per hit isn't bad at all. If you get that crit success and you're getting your 4 damage at level 1, that's actually really, really solid damage. The final level 1 feature, before we talk about your subclass, is Explode. This is a 2-action activity, and your innovation explodes. Don't worry, it doesn't break. It doesn't make it unusable, nothing like that. It explodes in a good way. All creatures within a 5-foot emanation from you, well, really from your innovations, which normally it'll be with you unless it's a construct, again, we'll talk about that. Anything around your innovation gets a basic reflex save against 2d6 fire damage. This does have the unstable trait, so keep that in mind. It might be the only unstable trait you get to use this combat. It's a decent enough AoE at level 1, because 2d6 around you at level 1 is actually pretty good against some low-level enemies. At every odd level, it does go up by 1d6, which keeps it kind of on the weaker side compared to similar spells, but at least it's kind of like an AoE cantrip. The size of the AoE does go up at 7th level and at 15th level, allowing you to choose to go from 5 feet to 10 feet or 15 feet if you really want to. Okay, we finally get to the innovations themselves, your subclass. There are 3, so this won't take too long. Each innovation gives you a special item that you get to augment as you level up. And there are special details with some of them that we need to talk about. So we'll start with armor. So first of all, you're going to get to choose a special type of armor. There are 2 different armors to choose from. There's the power suit or the subterfuge suit. Power suit is strength reliant, subterfuge is really about dexterity. With the power suit, you get a +5 to your AC, and you still get 1 from dex. And you just need a +3 in strength to be able to wear it. That is a massive boost. The subterfuge suit gives you +2 to your AC with still a +4 you can get from your dexterity, and you don't need any plus modifier in your strength. You just don't want to have a negative strength in order to use it. Both are incredibly strong. These are heavy armor level of stats, so you're really getting a boost in your AC by going this route. I'm going to show some examples of modifications as we look at these. So this is just one at each level, but this will give you an idea. So an initial modification for the armor would be the Phlogistonic Regulator. There's no way I said that right. You gain half your level in cold and fire resistance, and you get an extra +2 if you're currently in Overdrive. So that's a nice defensive boost on top of your armor. An example of a revolutionary level 7 modification would be automated impediments. All the squares adjacent to you are difficult terrain for your enemies, which means allies are going to be unaffected. That is great. And if you're really going to be up in there with enemies, this could be interesting, but it's still just difficult terrain. A couple of examples of feats that you can only take if you have this innovation are Electrify Armor, level 10. This is a single action. For 1 round, enemies that hit you in melee take 1d4 electricity damage, 2d4 if you're at least level 15, but it has the unstable trait option if you want to use it, where you can turn those d4s into d12s, and it lasts an entire minute. So for a whole combat, you can just ask them to come hit you and just hurt themselves. And then at level 14, we have Soaring Armor, and you get a passive fly speed as long as you have your innovation on. Just fly speed equal to your movement speed. Fantastic. All right, the Construct innovation. So you get your Construct companion that aids you in combat. So this is like having a beast companion for the druid or the ranger. This uses the prototype Construct companion stat block. When you overdrive, both you and the Construct get the overdrive bonuses. And if you crit fail, you both take the damage. From level 1, if you use 2 actions to command rather than 1, which is the standard, you get to have your innovation will take 3 actions, unlike the standard 2. So usually you have to get access to this some way else, like taking a feat later on for some of those other classes, but for Inventor, you just get it up front. You will get access to the usual companion improvements along the way. So these things we see just like we do with the druid getting access or the ranger getting access to like mature companion, things like that. There are similar ones for this, and they move at the same rate as something like the druid, so you'll level up pretty quickly. An example of an initial modification is the projectile launcher. Your construct gets a 1d4 ranged unarmed strike that does piercing or bludgeoning damage with the propulsive trait, which gets to add a little bit of damage from your strength, and it has a range of 30 feet. So a little bit of range damage for your construct. An example of a level 15 revolutionary modification would be Flight Chassis. Your construct also gains flight. Kind of like the armor did for you. Well, this time your construct can get it with 25 feet of movement. Not bad. Some feat examples: Lock On, level 10, 1 action. You choose an enemy and prepare to send your construct. As long as your next action is to do a 1 or 2 action command to your construct, your construct will get a +2 or +3 if you use the more expensive version bonus to hit against that enemy for the rest of its turn. It's a +4 if you're legendary crafting. So if you really want to leave a lot of the heavy hitting to your construct, this can actually be really useful. And at level 18, we have Engine of Destruction. 3 actions. You send out your construct to lay waste to all of your enemies. It strides once to make and then makes an attack against every enemy within 30 feet. These attacks have a +2 circumstance bonus to hit, and they don't increase your multiple attack penalty until after all attacks are done. You can just fire away. All right, the weapon innovation. So you are given a level 0 or level 1 simple or martial weapon, or a level 0 advanced weapon, but if you take the advanced weapon, you will not get an initial weapon modification. That could be worth it depending on what advanced weapon you take. Still, you can put normal runes on these weapons. Same thing with the armor, by the way. You can just put the normal runes on as you level it up. And your overdrive damage can be fire instead of your normal weapon damage with the weapon. An example of an initial modification would be Entangling Form. Your weapon gains the Disarm, Trip, and Grapple traits. Throw this on a high damage reach weapon and go to town. That is crazy, the amount of traits you get to add. A revolutionary modification is Rune Capacity. Your weapon can hold an extra property rune. Now, these are the runes that aren't your potency runes. These aren't your striking runes. These are the runes you add on top. Normally, you're maxed out at 3, and you can have 4 at max level. You can have always 1 extra, though, so No matter what, you're probably going to have a +3 potency rune already on here, making you up to 4 property runes. All right, some examples of some feats. At level 14, we have Explosive Maneuver for 1 action. If you just hit a creature with your melee weapon, you can grapple, trip, or shove it for 1 action. Your weapon has to have the same trait, and this uses the same multiple attack penalty that your strike used, and it only increases your multiple attack penalty after it's done. So normally, of course, I'd strike and then I'd have to use another action to grapple, trip, or shove, and that would take into account my multiple attack penalty at the time. Now you just get to avoid that tax, hitting at the same rate. And at level 18, Devastating Weaponry, 3 actions. Instead of your companion going out, why don't you just throw your weapon out there? That's right, you send your weapon out, and if it's a ranged weapon, you can just fire it. Otherwise, you just throw your weapon and it will go around and hit every enemy within 30 feet. Again, trying to hit it with the maximum attack penalty, your map doesn't go up until all attacks are done. So you just want to like Thor hammer it out there, go for it. That gives you a taste of the kinds of playstyles offered by your innovation. For those of you who didn't watch my Bard guide, a new thing I'm adding into my guides here is a look at how I think the class fits into 6 key components of combat. These components are tactical options, single target damage, multi-target damage, support, control, and survivability. They're ranked from 0 to 5, and I'll explain each one as I touch on them. Tactical options. The Inventor gets a 4 on this. There are so many ways to take feats that will give you a lot of options as an Inventor. Everything from being able to do ranged AoE damage, high single target damage, use a companion, this will help you flank, or use actions in a very different way to split yourself from your companion. You can deal with range damage, you can be up in melee. There are feats to help you clear greater distances. There's ways to heal party members. Your tactical options and the number of feats you can use, just very, very strong. The only thing that's stronger, I think most all casters are stronger when it comes to tactical options because of their spellcasting ability and what that offers. But as a martial, Inventors are very, very high in their tactical options. Single target damage. Before the remaster, I actually thought this was going to come in at a 3. The remaster, though not significant in what it did, actually helped the Inventor out a little bit. So why do I say single target damage is so high? Between the combination of Megaton Strike and their Overdrive and how it boosts damage, you're almost like a miniature barbarian if you want to be. So you can go and hit hard with melee weapons and do a great job of that. And you don't even need to be the weapon focused. In fact, you might be better off being the armor focused Inventor to keep yourself in a healthy place while still hitting like a truck with your weapons. So yeah, single target damage is solid. Multi-target damage is a little bit weaker. I gave a 2 here. While they do have options, things like Megavolt can give you a line option for doing some nice AoE damage, and of course you do have Explode, but that is fairly weak. It still does some AoE damage. I don't want to discount it. For a martial, you're actually doing okay, but compared to spellcasters or those that are actually focused on AoE damage, you're pretty low on the totem pole. Support. Yes, you have some support options. There are some base heal. There's at least a feat to help you with healing. There's just not a whole lot. You can use your companion, obviously, to help support your allies and do some flanking, but this really isn't the focus of the class. Control. There is almost nothing in control here. Yes, you can add modifications to your weapon that'll help you control, and you can certainly go with grapple builds using your weapon, which is kind of cool. That's kind of the bare minimum. You got to really lean into that. I really don't think this is a great control class. One call out I do want to make, though, is they do have a single feat that can be a great control option, but it requires the enemies to fail, or to get the real version of it, critically fail on a save against your class DC, so I don't really want to lean too much into that to give them points here. Survivability. Yeah, they're pretty solid on this. This is a class that can use good armor. If you go the armor route, you're particularly survivable, especially because you can take resistances to all sorts of types of damage. You've got decent hit points, and you can use your companion to help you with survivability needs. This is a class that can really keep themselves up on the battlefield. Even though you can't heal yourself, you have ways to avoid getting crit. You got ways to get out of the way, Movement counts here, so being able to get yourself away from the combat easily is a great thing to be able to do. Yeah, pretty survivable class. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the other level 1 feats. Some require specific innovations, most don't. I'll add on a few higher level feats to just get a taste of some of the things that are available to inventors. All right, built-in tools, level 1. You choose 2 sets of tools, like thieves' tools, healer kits, things like that, and you get to add them to your innovation, making them accessible to you at any time. Explosive leap, level 1, 1 action, unstable. You blast yourself in any direction 30 feet, but if you don't land on the ground, you will fall immediately after your next action. Haphazard repair, level 1, 1 action, unstable. You can repair your innovation. You don't need a flat surface. You just have to be adjacent to your innovation and then have a repair kit, but you can repair it for 1 action, which could be critical. No! I created you! Level 1, reaction, requires a construct innovation. You attempt to counteract your construct being controlled or confused. This uses your crafting check for the counteract, which will be really high for your chance to make this not... Now it's not going to come up very often, but if it does, you can probably shut that control down. Prototype companion, level 1. You gain a construct companion. So even if you didn't take the innovation, you can still have one. This is like the innovation companion, but you can't use it with your overdrive, and you don't get all the features, the added features that come with the special innovation version, and you're not going to get modifications. So you still have a companion though. Tamper, level 1, 1 action. You make a crafting check against the armor or weapon of an enemy in melee range. If you succeed or critically succeed against the creature's reflex DC, you will either give them a -2 penalty to attack rolls or make them off guard and have a -10 movement speed, depending if you go after the weapon or their armor. Pretty nice. Variable core. So our last level 1. This changes the damage type from your explode action and affects the damage of later class features that you're going to get. So right now, of course, explode is fire by default. You can make it electricity or cold. There's some options. All right, an example of some higher level feats. At level 4, Megaton Strike. 2 actions. You attack, and if you hit, you deal an extra weapon damage die. At level 10, this will be 2 additional damage dice, and at level 18, this will be 3 additional damage dice. If you give it the unstable trait, which doesn't have to have by default, add 1 more die onto each of those. So 2 die up front, 3 at 10, and 4 at 18th level. This can be upgraded at level 8 with the Gigaton Strike feat, which we're not going to talk about now, but just know that this can actually get stronger. And Deep Freeze. This is level 12, 2 actions. You deal cold damage to a creature within 60 feet and gives it a basic reflex save. The damage is only your level, but it can slow the movement or even give them the slowed condition depending on how the outcome of their save is. If you give it the unstable trait, it will instead target all creatures in a 60-foot cone, or a 90-foot cone if you're level 15 plus, which is just extraordinarily huge. This deals double your level in damage if you use the unstable version. So massive change to go unstable. The easiest innovation to use will either be armor or weapon, given the complexities of having a companion. The armor is more passive, at least at first, and most of the modifications are passive as well. The weapon is passive in a way, but you really have to know your weapon traits to get the most out of it. Most Inventor builds will want one of 2 paths, though you can go other routes if you want to, of course. Either build can be used with any of the innovations, though strength builds will probably be better with the weapon innovation in general just because of the number of weapons it opens up. So we see here we got a couple options here where we're always going to have intelligence as our primary ability score, but if you're going to go with weapon builds, you're probably going to want to go strength first, and then dexterity just enough to get you that bonus for armor, for medium armors, constitution because you'll probably be up in combat, and then wisdom and charisma as you see fit. If you want to go with a companion build, armor can go either way, or if you want to use finesse weapons, then it's dexterity for finesse weapons as a secondary. This opens up more armor options if you want lower armor. And then you've got constitution to back you up because you're going to be up there in combat. Wisdom and strength is kind of give take. You want a little extra damage on your attacks, but if you're not going to be up close, then maybe you want wisdom or charisma. All right, so let me give you just a quick sample build for level 1. Let's go with using the weapon innovation. So what are some nice weapons? If we're going to strength builds, you could have a maul and a warhammer. I like these as one and two-handed options. Probably turn my Maul into my innovation just because it hits really hard. If I'm going to be up there with a weapon anyway, I might as well hit hard. As for armor, we can throw on some chainmail and maybe even have a steel shield in case we want to go one-handed and shield some of the time. So your stats will be +4 in int, +3 in strength, +1 in con, 1 in dex, and +0 in your wisdom and charisma. For level 1 feat, I really think that it can be useful still to have a prototype companion. So I like that as a first feat, as it is a very strong addition to what you can do. And for an initial weapon modification, I brought it up, I like Entangling Form. It opens up 3 different athletics-based traits: disarm, trip, and grapple, and I think they're all great ways to mess with your enemies and really help out the team. All right, let me provide a little gameplay example for the Inventor that we just designed. Okay, our Inventor here is Galvatron and his trusty companion Sparks. They find themselves in a bad way against some angry orcs. Everyone rolls initiative. Looks like one of the orcs goes first and will rush Galvatron. It makes 1 strike, landing a hit with that and dealing modest damage to the Inventor. But that'll bring us to Galvatron up next. For his first action, he is going to use Overdrive. All right, do a quick d20 and... wow, all right, natural 20. We love to see that, which means it's a critical success, and we will add our intelligence modifier, the whole thing, to the damage of every strike we do for the entire combat. He then uses 1 action to command Sparks to flank the orc and attack. Sparks will rush behind the orc. This is, a miss on that attack, but the orc is still flanked. Galvatron then uses his last action to attack, and just enough for a hit. That is a d12 with +3 to strength, +4 from int. This means that just needs 8 or better to take out the orc, and boom. A 9 on that d12 for a massive 16 damage hit on round 1 without a crit. And that's enough to take out that orc. This scares the second orc, who decides to keep his distance and use ranged attacks. It will throw a javelin at Sparks and land the hit, but just barely. Sparks has a hearty 10 HP at level 1, and the javelin only does 6, so not too bad. The orc then equips another and gets behind cover. Well, this doesn't sit well with our Inventor, who decides to move up to the other side of the cover and move Sparks up there. All right, suddenly terrible noises can be heard, screams and squeaks alike. 3 giant rats rush around the corner. 1 takes out Sparks. Alone and desperate, Galvatron jumps into the middle of the rat pack, standing over Sparks, and for 2 actions, holds his weapon high as it explodes in a raging inferno. The rats made reflex saves, but even the quickest takes full damage for 10 in this case on 2d6, cooking the lot of them. Okay, so a little poetic license there, but you get the idea. The Inventor has a lot of options, even at level 1, for all kinds of situations. If you're looking at some pop culture examples of Inventors, we do see them plenty. You've got things like Iron Man, of course, should probably pop into mind. And yes, you can take something called Megavolt, which is a blast that Iron Man would let out. So feel free to do that and really lean into that heavily. You could be more like the Doctor, a lot more passive style of Inventor, but definitely on that wavelength. Or a personal favorite of mine from the 90s, Donatello. It just feels right. I hope you've liked this look at the Inventor. I hope you give the class another look now that the remaster has just come out. Guns and Gears Remastered is available, and I think that with the slight improvements that did happen, we've got little tiny improvements to things like Overdrive, that it really does round the class out just a little bit more. Already it was a fantastic class, a solid martial character with a lot of interesting options. Anyway, what do you think? Have you tried Inventors? Does this make you want to try one? Is there something about them that you find particularly interesting? Leave a comment below. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go evaluate these 3 innovations to see which one's going to rank at the top of my ranking list. And as always, adventure on.